Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a very sunny Valley. Norwich City, of course, looking back to get back to winning ways this afternoon after defeat midweek against Southampton. Adam Harvey, joined by Connor Southwell. The team news has just dropped, so we'll bring you that straight away and get some reaction. Of course, Jack Stacey, Philip Clement yesterday said it'd be a late call on him. He's not made the starting 11 or the bench for that matter. Here's the team. Kovacevic in goal. Gibbs, McConville, Cordoba, Fisher, the back four. Matson and McLean, the midfield two. Magoma, Slimani and Ahmed behind Matthias, Chris Goran. That again, Kovacevic in goal. Gibbs, McConville, Cordoba, Fisher. Matson, McLean, Magoma, Slimani, Ahmed, Chris Goran. The bench, Grimshaw is back amongst the substitutes. Medic, Darling, Field, Wright, Forson, Marcondes, Springett and Mundell Smith. Connor, I guess there we go. No Jack Stacey in the starting 11 or amongst the substitutes. No Ben Creseni either. I think we probably both got the sense yesterday from Clement's kind of answer that they probably weren't going to be involved today. Liam Gibbs gets that slot in at fullback. Your reaction to that?
What was it Philippe Clement said yesterday? He's played everywhere but in goal, and it feels a lot like that, doesn't it? A blow to the way that Norwich want to play, I think, in terms of missing probably that natural left-footed player on the left. I think we've seen that a little bit. As good as Callum Fisher is, he's their first-choice right-back, isn't he? And the problem I always feel when you get him on the left is he wants to come in the pitch, which as does Ali Ahmed. So you end up with quite a narrow right side, I think, to that extent. And then, Liam Gibbs, I thought he actually did quite well in his cameo when he came off the bench. There was a couple of really powerful runs. One really nice cross in particular that Jack Stevens deflected onto his own bar. And I can kind of see the logic there in terms of, I think he's got really good running power. Technically, I think he's pretty proficient, and hard work wise, I think he's going to give you those sort of legs and energy every day. So I can kind of see that from an offensive and technical perspective. For me, the biggest question mark is the defensive element, and coming up against a Charlton team who are much improved in recent weeks, played some really tough teams, beaten some really tough teams. That feels like it's going to be a real test. And as well, I would point out maybe the height point as well on both sides. It gives Charlton, who are quite a direct team, pretty easy targets, really, if they want to go and peel. I mean, I don't know, we haven't seen the Charlton team yet. I don't know if Miles Leaburn is playing, but he's a big unit. Gives him an opportunity to peel off to those kind of wide channels and for them to hit him quite direct. And he then gets dominance in those areas. So, it's a shame, and just goes to show, I think, the limited resources that Philippe Clement is having to work with, and so many creative solutions needed at the moment.
Pelle Matson, of course, back in the starting 11 as well, having been rested. Obviously came on in the second half at St Mary's, but I guess sort of this kind of game, his sort of industrial nature in the middle of the park is not exactly a bad thing.
No, I felt this would be. I actually felt, maybe they would leave him on the bench for the Carrow Road game and start him in the two home games. But I think actually the way they've managed him in terms of having that kind of sort of spell that he had against Preston, where he didn't play 90 minutes. What was it, 65 minutes last Saturday? Then obviously he had the 45 at Southampton. I think they have managed that probably quite well, and he did give them an impetus and some energy that they needed. And I think if Pelle Matson is fit enough to start a game, particularly away from home, but in general, then you start him, and alongside Kenny McLean, that gives them real thrust in there. So, I think that's Norwich City's best midfield pairing. I think we've seen that throughout the season. Those two, when they play together, can compete with the very best in the Championship. They're going to need that today in terms of that physicality and the athleticism that he brings, I think, in terms of what this game will be in the middle of the park, with probably some help from those forward three. So, I think probably the natural decision, but again, what it does give you the opportunity to do now, you've got Field in reserve, although he may well be needed at left back. You never know the way it's going at the moment, is he just gives you that opportunity to change things as well. So really good to see him back in the 11, and hopefully the other side of the international break will be at a stage then when he can play games and start them pretty regularly.
I've seen a few people mentioning maybe that Clement yesterday in his press conference decided to offer up that McLean has obviously played left back previously, and we saw that under a few different Norwich City managers down the years. Not played that position under him yet, but that might, as you say, might be needs must at some point given the nature of this season and fullback issues. Also, Sam Field, when he arrived, there was kind of mention that he can play in that position. I guess, are you surprised that maybe he didn't look towards those two?
Yes and no. I think more so Field, you could see as that being a left back option in terms of the height that he gives you. I think you could then roll into a back three, couldn't you? Although I think it does ask a lot of Ali Ahmed then to tuck in if you do that, and the shape becomes a little bit more disjointed. So I think we have seen where possible. I know he's put a midfielder at right back today, but where possible he's liked to kind of keep, even if it's kind of groups of players, so defenders in defensive positions. We haven't really seen that much experimentation from him in that regard. So Yeah, I can see the logic in terms of the energy and the profile of both of those players. I think Field is probably less in terms of the pace and the physicality aspect in terms of like robustness and that willingness to tackle tough. We see him more in kind of setting the pace and setting some traps in midfield. That seems to be where he's kind of better suited. So I can kind of understand why maybe he's gone for Gibbs on the right and Fisher on the left in the circumstances. But yeah, look, if it would have been Field at left back today, I don't think I'd have hated that either. I think Charlton are one of the few teams that play with wing backs, and that feels probably, if you're going to pick a game where you needed to rotate it, that's probably the one. But again, I think there's maybe the Maatsen factor as well. And this is a huge part of the injury situation at the moment, is they're having to make decisions not just with kind of the front line involved, but also changes from the bench. You know, if you bring off one player, what is the knock on? If you then have Samfield at left back, it then limits the options in terms of stepping into that number 6 role. You've got Jacob Wright, essentially, who I think we would probably say is a bit more advanced, and certainly Philippe Clement sees as him being further up the pitch. He's played as a 10 and as an 8 really under him. So I think that probably is in the thinking. If maybe we were a couple of weeks on and Pelle Maatsen was fit enough to play for a 90 and that was pretty indisputable, I think we'd be in a situation where probably Samfield could then do the job. But yeah, it's tough to kind of square that circle. I think when you're juggling so many different plates and so many different elements, you've got to make some tough decisions, and I think that's probably one that's needed to be made today.
Yeah, someone just asking for the bench again. Dan Grimshaw back on the bench. Medic, Darling, Field, Wright, Forson, Marcondes, Springett and Mundle-Smith. I guess Marcondes is maybe a slightly interesting one given the quotes during the week, and you asked Clement this yesterday, fairly adamant he's not going to be at the football club next season, but I guess, another sort of indication that they probably can't really afford to let him go quite yet because, as today's pretty proven, that they kind of need him on the bench.
Yeah, there's been some talk in the week about a mutual termination early of his deal. I just don't see that in terms of why that would make sense from a Norwich City perspective, because as we stood here today and we're talking about midfielders in fullback and right backs at left back and one fit striker on the bench, it just doesn't feel like they've got the option or the depth to do that at the moment. They need bodies, and it does feel like he travels here as a body, doesn't it, really? Because I think it's no league minutes since that Stoke defeat in January. That was off the bench quite late. He's not really played this side of the new year. So it's pretty clear his situation. As you say, Philippe Clement spoke about that in detail yesterday. He's not going to be at the football club beyond the end of this season. And so you're almost better placed putting your investment into players like Errol Mundle-Smith, who they do see a long-term future for. I guess the point then maybe would be, well, is there an academy player that's good enough to be drafted in? Zach Bauman has obviously travelled with the squad a few times. He signed for Manchester United late in the summer. Elliot Miles clearly doing good things as well. But again, you've got this trade-off almost then of bringing a youth player to a first-team game and then not getting the minutes that maybe they need in the game last night, for example. So again, all of this kind of push and pull and the impact of decisions that is being made behind the scenes, and that probably explains why they are bringing Emi Marcondes. And I think the most pertinent point for me that Clement made yesterday was his attitude and how he's taken that news, because, and let's be honest, we've seen it from a few other players in recent and not so recent times, where a message like that would be delivered, and maybe the receptiveness to that would be very different. And could anyone have blamed Emi Marcondes if he'd have gone, right, okay, and stuck two fingers up at Norwich City and said, right, I'm off? No, I don't think they could have in the circumstances. And I think he deserves a huge amount of credit. I think it speaks to the individual that he is, the professional that he is, that he's still travelling, he's still imparting his knowledge on those young players. And I think it's worth making the point as well, he does loads of community work as well. So in terms of his investment in the football club, I don't think that has ever wavered really, despite that news. So I think if it did get to a situation where he was called upon, I think there's no doubt in my mind that there would be a player there that would give 100% to the cause and what they're doing. So, interesting that he's on the bench. But, I think underlines probably that point that Norwich are in no position to just give him away at this stage of their season.
Yeah, let's bring you the Charlton team now. They've got Mannion in goal, Ramsey, Jones, Bell and Harry Clark, of course, an Ipswich connection there. Coventry, Sonny Carey, of course, a man that's well known to Norwich City fans, given his connections to Norfolk. Doherty, Chambers, Lyndon Dykes, who is a threat at this level, proving that down the years at QPR and Birmingham, and Campbell. Their bench is Kaminsky, Gillespie, Connor Cody, Goff, Rankin Costello, Fuller, Fevrier, Leeburn, who you mentioned there previously, Connor, quite a difficult kind of player to deal with given his physical presence, and Charlie Kelman. They're obviously a side that have picked up 7 points in the last 3 games. A win here last time out against Birmingham. They went to Middlesbrough. Norwich sort of found that difficult to go in there, and obviously they look at their league position, they're second in the table. They managed to go there and sort of grind out a 1-0 win, and then a 1-1 draw away at Oxford in their most recent fixture, where they managed to score from the spot in stoppage time to pick up a pretty vital point. And you kind of look at the league table at the moment, they're 3 points behind Norwich, but crucially 9 points above the drop zone, which I think if you'd probably offer that to most of the home faithful here before the start of the season, given kind of 8 games to go, and you'd pretty much good as securing the championship for next season, they probably would have taken it. So I guess what are you expecting from them today? Nathan Jones' side, Norwich have experienced that down the years when he was at Luton and Stoke and plenty of other sides. It's always going to be a difficult test. Yeah,
they're going to be tough. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to be direct in a way that is a compliment, really. I think they're going to be a really tricky team to face, and Norwich are facing them at a difficult time as well. You mapped it out there: wins at Middlesbrough, beaten Birmingham here, and I think generally their record here has been pretty mid-table, really. So it's going to be a sellout here today as well. They've made a lot of noise about their crowd, and I'm sure we'll come on to the away end a little bit later as well. But all of that adds to a sense of occasion. They're trying maybe to replicate what Norwich have done in terms of getting over the line in championship status. Context very different. This is their first year up from League One, and I mean, you look around this stadium, there's no way this is a third division stadium in England, really, and that this is a third division club. So it's going to be really tricky, as they all are in the championship. It's going to be physical, and I think as well the context of, Norwich have had essentially 48 hours to prepare for this game since that Southampton game. These have had a full week since their last game. So physically, I think it's going to ask a really big question of a Norwich team who typically have kind of squatted challenges away, haven't they, and found solutions and methods of kind of overcoming them. And this, in many ways, I think mentally, physically, would be one of the best if they could do it. And it's going to be a really tough game, this, I think, and a really good test of where Norwich City are. May not mean anything in terms of the grand scheme of the table. Of course, there is still I think now a fading, but definitely a very faint opportunity of getting in the top 6. So for as long as that's mathematically possible, Norwich need to win games and try and win them all between now and the end of the season.
On a lighter note, before we maybe turn to some more serious matters, a few people quite concerned at Paddy's absence this afternoon. What have you done with Paddy? I think a few people are concerned that maybe he's injured. Has he got a hamstring injury? Is he filling in at left back? Can you quash these rumours?
Well, I think if you'd have seen him leaving St Mary's the other night, he was not in the best of health. That's not why he misses today. He's just a little bit of a cold, which I think anyone with kids can sort of sympathise and relate to. We're just managing his minutes, essentially. He's had a lot of football this year, and he's at home today looking after his little ones while his wife is out. So don't sweat. He'll be duly back after the international break. No issues there that we're aware of. Anyway, maybe he's, I don't know, flown to Toronto or something, but I don't think there's any cause for concern for us at this stage.
Yeah, Dan mentioning about the international break, and obviously that's something you actually posed yesterday to Philippe Clement, and I thought his answer on that was probably as strong as I've heard him on a lot of things, really. He was pretty critical, I guess, of that schedule. Someone like Ali Ahmed having to play in the early hours of Wednesday morning over in Canada, then having to fly back, not going to be back in England until probably the early hours of Thursday morning. Norwich have had to push that training session back on the Thursday to lunchtime just to be able to incorporate them. I think him and a couple of others within that group. And then, of course, the game on the Friday against Portsmouth at home. So, yeah, I guess, obviously, great to see Norwich players get international recognition. Someone like Errol Mundell-Smith, good to see him amongst the England youth setup as well. But it does come at a little bit of a cost. Yeah,
it's a nonsense, really, isn't it? I think particularly those, and again, this is kind of the problem with coming off the international break and straight into an Easter schedule. It's that you get a situation where, ordinarily you get an extra day. So a player playing Wednesday, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, and there'll be people maybe playing very small violins for those players. But, Ali Ahmed's playing in the early hours of Wednesday morning, UK time in Toronto. He's then got to get a flight back. He's not going to be back here before Thursday morning. He's going to have one training session and probably some significant jet lag to overcome to feature for Norwich City on Good Friday against Portsmouth. I mean, Jose Cordoba's in South Africa. Okay, the time difference issue isn't maybe as big as in the Ahmed example, but that's still a significant distance to come back from. Jose Cordoba, I've just mentioned him. Anis Ben Slimani, the other one, is going to be due back late in that week as well. So I think he's right, and particularly in the context that we've spoken about, the squad is so thin. It's not like they've got an opportunity where they can rotate these players out. Okay, they may have a Mo Toure, they may have Oscar Schwartau back the other side of the break, but we're not talking about kind of huge numbers of players are going to be back and available, that it gives them the opportunity to rotate and change things. So, yeah, it's an issue, and again, the issue is, even though they're friendly games, they're the final games before the World Cup for a lot of these players. So there's no way that an Ali Ahmed and Anis Ben Slimani don't want to play, particularly Anis, who's kind of been drafted back into the Tunisia squad, having missed the African Cup of Nations, rightly so, after his form with Norwich. They're not going to want to miss those games. It's not up to Norwich to decide that they don't play in those games. But the scheduling is, pretty ridiculous, really, to expect players to come back from the other side of the world and be ready within 24 hours to play a game of championship football is, I can understand why Philippe Clement is incredibly irate about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess maybe looking at the championship picture, defeat on Wednesday night, Norwich failed to sort of narrow that gap to the playoffs. I think there's obviously been debate amongst different sort of elements of the fan base, whether that's really something that was achievable this season or not, whether it was more of a sort of pipeline dream, which given the position that when Clement walked in the door, Norwich had 9 points after 15 games, I think it was, and you sort of looked at it at that point, it was just survival, and they pretty much already secured that with 8 games to go in sort of the middle of March. So question here, just saying our playoffs gone at this point, top 10 finished the goal now, a chance today for the international break, 7 games to go after the other side, the East Anglian derby amongst that as well. Yeah, I guess probably more today is just getting the win, going into that international break with a little bit of confidence, and then maybe looking more towards next season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the interest for me is that Norwich have a lot of teams. You mentioned the run-in in the final 8 games after today. Got to go away to Millwall, who are, let me just check, but they are drawing at Portman Road as we sit here at the moment. They've got automatic promotion ambitions at the moment. They've obviously got, as you say, the East Anglian derby. We've got to go to Hull as well. Help me out if I'm missing any, but that's free of kind of teams that are in the top 6 to play. So those are going to be really interesting tests, even with a view to next season in terms of, well, okay, how much of this current group can get close enough to them? And of course, there's always stuff to play for those players, as I think we've spoken about Emi Marcondes. You've got a situation where players are playing for futures. I don't get the sense Philippe Clement is going to muck around. He's going to be ruthless, and I think we've seen that in terms of the decisions that he takes ahead of obviously a summer where we've spoken about this on podcasts where Norwich are going to be looking to raise the ceiling of what they have in their squad. So it's down to those players and maybe some of those who have taken steps forward in the months that we've seen under Clement, McConville, Cordoba, Kellen Fisher, others, to prove that they can keep going, and they've got another level to go. Vladan Kovacevic. So I think in many ways, this is the firing gun really to the 26-27 campaign, and we're going to learn a hell of a lot about Norwich between now and the end of the season, I think, and more importantly, Philippe Clement it's going to be relevant to how he shapes his squad and how they shape the team. And what it does enable you to do, I think, like the Marcondes sort of thing shows, is it allows you to be really proactive. And they've got the Josh Sargent money. They can be really proactive in their recruitment. They can get their kind of bits and bobs aligned to make sure they can hit the ground running. And that is the key on and off the pitch to make sure this football club is geared towards, hopefully, a real tilt at promotion next season, whatever that looks like. And that starts really from the here and now. And the thing is, look, can Norwich win their final 8 and get in the top 6? Of course they can. Is it likely? No, it's probably not. So I think you've got to be realistic. He's certainly realistic. And I think from between now and the end of the season, it's about mood. It's about seeing how much they can compete against some really good championship sides and trying to continue this progress that we've seen so far under him.
Yeah, before we go to score predictions, you mentioned the away end sold out again this afternoon, sold out pretty quickly as well. I think, maybe even before it reached sort of season ticket members and sort of general sale, which speaks volumes, I think, of the positivity around the football club at the moment. The fan base, we've seen them travel well. They sold out Oxford away recently. Where else have they been? I think Clement actually referenced Birmingham on his first game. They managed to sell that one out. Leicester, another sort of recent away game where they managed to sell it out. I think over 3,000 expected. Norwich not played here, of course, since 2022 in that FA Cup game, and I think the last league game is quite a long way back before that, maybe sort of 2015 time. Might have even been the Wembley season, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not a ground that Norwich have been to too many times in recent sort of years, and I guess maybe that's why a lot of these fans are probably travelling here with excitement, and it might even be a new ground for plenty of them.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it speaks to two things. I mean, absolutely, the geography is a factor as well. This is one of the better trips. I think that's clear in terms of the ones that Norwich City fans have to do, and so many of those guys in that away end who are brilliant, and we see every week will have covered loads of miles, but it gives an opportunity for some younger fans to maybe get a taste of going away and seeing Norwich play on the road. You say that. This is a really good away end, I think, as well, in terms of acoustics, but also in terms of you get that whole end towards that goal, or behind that goal, sorry. And to have nearly 3,500 Norwich fans here today is spectacular as a number. And hopefully, and Clement sort of referenced this yesterday, Norwich are going to really need them, because there are going to be tired minds, tired legs in that team. A lot of the same players having to go again and again and again in recent periods. That is going to take the wind out of their sails, so to speak. They're going to need any sinew of energy and enthusiasm that they can give. But I think it also probably speaks to the optimism and the excitement that Philippe Clement has managed to conjure up. The fact that so many people are willing. We've just discussed kind of the context of their season, really. And I know the tickets would have gone on sale earlier, and maybe they would have still have been in the race at that stage. But even so, there was a large possibility that this would be a dead rubber by the time it came round. It's not fully, because there's still mathematically things on the line and things that are possible. But the likelihood is both of these teams are going to be playing in the Championship next season. So the fact that so many have got on coaches, got in cars, got trains, and I think you were telling me that there's kind of diversions and all sorts, and having to go via Cambridge, not the easiest thing in the world. I think that's testament to the energy and excitement that Philippe Clement and this team have managed to muster in recent weeks. And hopefully there'll be some really good celebrations at the end of the game. And if we do, what an angle we've got for them.
Indeed, yeah. I was speaking to a Charlton journalist on Terrace Talk earlier this week, and he said, when this place is in League One and maybe the home end's a bit more empty, and no disrespect to maybe some of the smaller sides in League One, but they don't exactly bring huge followings. He said when you see a sold out away end and obviously a relatively sold out home end as well, it does create a lot better atmosphere, and it makes it feel like more of an occasion than kind of a soulless bowl. So hopefully we get to enjoy that a bit more today, and hopefully the away end's the one celebrating come 90 minutes. And with that, Conor, I'm going to push you for a score prediction. I think you sort of mentioned you could see Norwich City getting a win on the road when we were sort of on the way down here. So you're going to stick with that?
Yeah, I am. I think they can. I think they've got the attacking players, particularly in behind Chris Goran, to cause Charlton real problems. We've seen. I think that's a really exciting. I know we've spoken predominantly about the defence, but that Marcondes, Slimani, Ahmed, free behind Chris Goran, I think is really exciting. It's all about how they service him. I think he had 7 touches in the first half. In midweek, Chris Goran, so they need to supply him a little bit better than they did. But look, if they can replicate what they did in the second half at Southampton, I think they've shown they're good enough to go away to any Championship team and cause them real problems. So hopefully they can find a bit more of that cutting edge in the final third that was lacking. But yeah, I think they'll do that. I think it'll be a narrow victory, and hopefully, to keep pushing them into the top half of the table. So I'm going to go over 2-1 Norwich win, Adam. What about you?
Yeah, I've kind of got the feeling that Norwich will get the job done today here and get a win, which, as you said, I think it then sort of leaves us into the international break with a little bit of optimism and positivity. All right, the season might not have a lot riding on it now between, in terms of the league position, but I think it will just help kind of, build into those games the other side of the break where they have got some difficult games. The likes of Millwall away, the likes of Portsmouth who are obviously scrapping down the bottom at Carrow Road, then the East Anglian derby, and they're all really good tests to kind of see where this group's at moving in towards the summer, where it is going to be decision time for Clement on certain individuals, and I'm sure some of these players will be deciding where their future lies. So I think Norwich will win today, and I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to keep a clean sheet, and it would again maintain this record that they haven't conceded now an away goal in something like second half goal in about 13 games, I think it is now, and a relatively good away record of course as well. I think it's seen now 2 wins or 2 defeats, on the road in 2026. So, hopefully they can maintain that here today in the sunshine. We'll have all the usual coverage across our channels. It'll be me on the live blog today. We'll have Conor speaking to Philippe Clement post-match. Of course, have all the player reaction as well, and then all the usual coverage coming your way then tomorrow as well. So, fingers crossed for a good afternoon and another 3 points, and we'll see you in the next one.